Sitting quietly on my ship, I recently found myself captivated by the old Earth television series known to your world as Teen Wolf. It made me wonder if the terrifying image of the werewolf is merely a creative invention of your ancestors, or something far more tangible. During my travels through time, I have seen many strange things, but the persistent fear of the wolfman is truly one of the greatest. Did humans simply invent this monster to explain the darkness, or was it a failed attempt to understand a reality they could not name? I want to take you on a journey through legends, history, and medicine to find the truth hidden behind the sharp claws and fur. The mystery of the werewolf is not just about a creature of the night, but about the very nature of the human spirit itself. We will explore the deepest secrets of ancient Greece and the cold forests of Romania to see where these terrifying stories first began to grow. By the end of this episode, you might find that the conclusion is far more unexpected and haunting than any Hollywood horror movie script. Prepare your mind for a deep dive into the shadows of the past as we uncover the biological and psychological roots of this legend. Let us begin our search for the werewolf, not as a myth, but as a reflection of the fears that haunt every human heart. In modern culture, the werewolf is defined by the dramatic transformation that occurs whenever the full moon rises high in the dark night sky. We often imagine a man screaming in pain as his bones break and reshape themselves into the form of a powerful, predatory wild beast. These creatures are usually depicted wandering through thick, misty forests, searching for their next innocent victim to hunt down in the cold moonlight. The cinematic werewolf is a slave to its hunger, losing all human reason and becoming a vessel for pure, animalistic rage and primal survival. When the sun finally begins to rise over the horizon, the beast painfully reverts back to its human form, often with no memory. This cycle of transformation has become a staple of literature and horror cinema, appearing in countless books that terrify readers of all ages. Popular folklore tells us that a werewolf can only be stopped by a silver bullet, a detail that adds a sense of poetic tragedy. From the black and white classics of the past to the modern digital spectacles, the werewolf remains one of the most iconic monsters in human history. You probably feel like you know this creature well, but I am here to tell you that the truth is much more complex. Now that we have established the popular image, it is time to break it down and see what lies beneath the surface of fiction. If the werewolf is just a figment of the imagination, we must ask why almost every major human civilization has a similar story. From the frozen tundras of the north to the warm Mediterranean shores, the tale of the man-beast appears in various forms and different names. I decided to investigate this myself, using my abilities to look back through the layers of time and see the origin of fear. Our journey today will follow a very specific path. We will look at the myths, the history, and then the scientific explanations provided. We need to understand if there was a biological reason for these stories, or if they were purely a product of the human mind. The werewolf might be a metaphor for the struggle between our civilized selves and the wild, untamed instincts that hide within every living soul. Scientists have many theories, but before we listen to them, we must first hear the voices of the ancient storytellers who started it. This exploration is not just about monsters. It is about how humans process the unknown and how they turn their terror into legendary stories. We will cross-reference historical accounts with modern knowledge to see where the lines between reality and fantasy begin to blur and eventually disappear. Follow me as we step into the heart of the legends, beginning with a king who committed a crime that changed history forever. Ancient Greek legends tell a chilling story of King Lycaon, a man whose dark heart once dared to test the wisdom of the gods. Lycaon believed he could trick the gods by serving them a dish made from human flesh during a royal feast in his magnificent palace. Zeus, the king of the gods, was not fooled by this horrific act and decided to punish Lycaon in a very fitting, cruel way. The divine punishment was to transform the king into a wolf, forcing his outward appearance to finally match the predatory nature of his soul. This myth suggests that the werewolf began not as a random monster, but as a moral warning about the consequences of human evil. The term lycanthropy actually comes from this king's name, forever linking the idea of the wolfman to the concept of divine or moral judgment. In this story, the transformation is a curse that cannot be escaped, a mark of shame that stays with the person for their entire life. It teaches us that the Greeks viewed the wolf as a symbol of the ultimate outsider, someone who has abandoned the rules of society. The story of Lycaon spread through the ancient world, planting the first seeds of the werewolf myth in the minds of many different cultures. Even today, we see echoes of this king's tragedy and how we describe people who lose their humanity to their own dark, violent impulses. In the folklore of Romania, the legend of Corvinus tells a story of a powerful man who survived a terrible, ancient plague. Alexander Corvinus supposedly had 3 sons, each of whom inherited a different part of the strange and mysterious infection that had changed him. One son was bitten by a bat and became the first vampire, while the second was bitten by a wolf and became a werewolf. The third son remained a normal human, but he was forever an outcast, carrying the dormant strain of the family's strange and dark legacy. This Romanian legend suggests that the werewolf and the vampire are actually part of the same family tree, born from a single biological event. It is a fascinating attempt to explain the existence of evil and monsters through the lens of family, genetics, and the spread of disease. Modern films like Underworld have used this specific myth to create a cinematic universe where these 2 creatures are eternal enemies in a war. The idea of a virus or a plague making monsters is a very early example of how people tried to rationalize the supernatural. These stories show that the fear of the werewolf was often tied to the fear of getting sick or losing one's identity to biology. By linking monsters to a common ancestor, the legends of Romania created a complex mythology that still fascinates and terrifies us to this day. Deep in the history of Transylvania, there are accounts of the Sacharozan family, where children were reportedly born with the mark of the wolf. These children were said to have unusual physical features, such as hair on their palms and eyebrows that met in the middle of their foreheads. The local villagers believed that these were the early signs of a transformation that would fully manifest when the children reached their adult years. In these accounts, lycanthropy was not a curse from a god, but a hereditary condition passed down from one generation to the next. There was a terrifying belief that even a simple bite from a member of this family could infect a normal person with the beast. This historical anecdote hints at the idea of a medical condition, long before modern science could identify things like hypertrichosis or rare hormonal disorders. The Sacharozan story is a bridge between pure mythology and the historical reality of people who were misunderstood because of their physical appearances. It reminds us that many monsters in history were actually just people who suffered from rare illnesses that the public could not understand. The fear of the wolf child created a culture of isolation and prejudice that haunted these families for centuries in the remote mountain villages. As we look closer at these records, we begin to see the tragic human reality that often lies at the heart of every monster. According to the ancient systems of folklore, there are three primary ways that a person can be turned into a terrifying, bloodthirsty werewolf. The first method is through heredity, where the condition is passed down through the bloodline, often skipping a generation before appearing again. The second method is the most famous one in modern movies, being bitten by another werewolf and surviving the attack to tell the tale. The third method involves magic or a curse, where a person uses an enchanted wolf skin or drinks water from a wolf's footprint. Every successful myth needs a clear set of rules, and these three methods provided a logical framework for how the monster could spread. By having multiple ways to become a werewolf, the stories became more versatile and could be applied to almost any scary or unexplained situation. These rules also helped communities identify who might be a hidden beast among them, leading to many tragic trials and unfair historical executions. In some cultures, putting on a belt made of wolf skin was enough to give a person the strength and the ferocity of the predator. Whether it was through blood, a bite, or a spell, the result was always the same: a total loss of the human identity. Understanding these systems of transformation is crucial if we want to see how the myth was built to be so durable over time. As we move from the world of legends into the historical record, we find very interesting writings from some of the greatest ancient doctors. Famous scholars like Ibn Sina, known to the West as Avicenna, and al-Zahrawi actually described cases of people who acted like wild animals. They noted that some patients suffered from a form of melancholy that caused them to howl at the moon and hide in cemeteries. These doctors were documenting a psychological condition where the person truly believed they had been transformed into a wolf or a similar beast. This clinical description started to make people wonder, could the werewolf be a disease of the mind rather than a monster of the night? Medical records from the Middle Ages describe symptoms like extreme thirst, pale skin, and a violent, uncontrollable desire to eat raw, red meat. When you look at these descriptions through the eyes of a person in the year 1000, it is easy to see how a monster was born. The historical evidence suggests that werewolves were often just people suffering from severe mental illness, rabies, or rare and undiagnosed genetic conditions. This realization starts to shift our perspective, making us feel more sympathy than fear for the individuals who were labeled as these beasts. History shows us that the line between a clinical diagnosis and a supernatural legend is often thinner than we would ever like to admit. The Vikings of the North spoke of elite warriors called Berserkers, men who entered a trance-like state of fury and wore wolf skins. These warriors were said to be immune to pain and possessed a superhuman strength that allowed them to fight like wild, untamed animals. The famous traveler Ahmed ibn Fadlan even wrote about these men, describing how they would howl and bite their shields before a battle. They often used herbal stimulants or mushrooms to achieve this state, leading them to act with a violence that terrified all of Europe. To the people they attacked, these men were not just soldiers. They were literal werewolves who had traded their souls for battle power. The legend of the werewolf might have been a way for frightened civilizations to explain the terrifying, drug-fueled rage of these northern raiding parties. Sometimes the myth is born from a real human, not a beast, showing that man is capable of a horror far greater than fiction. History tells us that these berserkers were eventually broken by clever tactics and the changing times, but their legend lived on in stories. The berserker is perhaps the most real version of the werewolf, a person who chooses to become the beast for the sake of war. This reminds us that the most dangerous monsters are often those who can walk among us as ordinary men until the fight begins. After searching through the deep layers of time and myth, we can see that the werewolf is a product of human fear. The ancient link between the full moon and madness was a way for our ancestors to explain things they did not understand. What they called a curse or transformation was often a mix of mental illness, rare medical conditions, and the effects of toxic plants. The werewolf was never a supernatural creature that lived in the woods. It was a ghost created by ignorance, disease, and social isolation. However, the fact that this legend has survived for thousands of years proves that it speaks to something very deep within us all. We all have a side of ourselves that we fear, a wild, uncontrolled part that we try to keep hidden from the rest of society. The werewolf is simply the mirror that humans use to look at their own darkness, without having to admit that it is theirs. As an observer of your species, I find it fascinating that your imagination can turn a simple illness into a legendary, immortal beast. My journey through the history of the Wolfman ends here, but the lessons about human nature and fear will stay with me forever. Remember, the most dangerous monsters are rarely found in the dark forest. They are usually hidden right inside the complex human mind. If you feel the pull of these ancient mysteries, I invite you to subscribe to this channel and ring the notification bell today. Please show your support for these historical journeys by hitting the like button and sharing this story with those who love the unknown. Your engagement helps keep these stories alive. So I encourage you to share this video across your social networks to find more seekers.